Alô, alô.
Responde.
logando meu headset.
Já.
Raquel?
Yes. Boa noite a todas, todos e todes. Esta é a segunda palestra magna da 25ª edição do Encontro Nacional de Estudantes de Relações Internacionais. Encerraremos este segundo dia de evento com a palestra intitulada The World After, Without Structural Racism, Perspective on Real of the Future. Um mundo após, sem o racismo estrutural. Uma perspectiva ou uma expectativa pouco real sobre o futuro. As perguntas poderão ser feitas ao longo da palestra pelo chat do YouTube e a nossa comissão ficará responsável pela filtragem das mesmas. Dito isto, convido a doutora Mireille Fanon Mendes, France, professora da Universidade de Paris, Descartes, e também professora visitante da Universidade da Califórnia, Berkeley, é especialista em Direito Internacional e Resolução de Conflitos, membro da União Judaica Francesa pela Paz. Já trabalhou para a Unesco e para a Assembleia Nacional Francesa. Foi perita, especialista e presidente de 2014 até 2016 do Grupo de Trabalho das Nações Unidas sobre Afrodescendentes. Em 2009, recebeu o Prêmio de Direitos Humanos do Conselho de Justiça, Igualdade e Paz. Dr. Mireille Fanon, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in our event. It is a great honor for us to have you here, and I would like to invite you to share your thoughts with us about this extremely important theme, discussing structural racism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you to ENERI to invite me to participate to your event and to present some reflections. I'm sorry I don't speak Brazilian Portuguese, even I don't speak Portuguese. That's why I will present in English.
So I'm going to start translating you simultaneously now, but at first I just wanted to make sure that I could.
It's too long. No, it's too long. Really. Oh,
what is too long? Your introduction?
You translate consecutive.
No, it will be simultaneous. I was just making sure that everything was working fine. Então, vou iniciar, gente. Nós fizemos aqui inicialmente uma tradução consecutiva, mas os próximos estágios serão em tradução simultânea, ok? Então, ela está agradecendo pelo convite e disse também que, infelizmente, ela não fala nem português, nem tampouco portunhol, e, portanto, ela vai compartilhar essas palavras em inglês e nós teremos tradução simultânea. Thank you, Dr. Fanon. Please go ahead.
Now I can speak without any stop?
With no stops whatsoever.
Ah, okay, I did not understand.
No,
Sorry.
it was just the very first, minute of getting acquainted with the mechanism.
I understood. Sorry for the misunderstanding. Sorry.
Oh, no, please, no apologies needed.
Okay. The American Congress, within the framework of the Committee of Judicial Affairs of the House of Representatives, adopted Wednesday. Sorry, I have to.
Lower your volume, otherwise you're going to be hearing my voice.
I have to switch on the volume, otherwise okay, sorry. The House of Representatives adopted Wednesday, April 14, a bill to study and develop reparation proposal for African American. The Commission shall examine enslavement and discrimination in the colony and the United States from 1619 to the present and recommend appropriate remedies, unquote. The Commission shall identify the role of the federal and state government in supporting the institution of slavery, forms of discrimination in the public and private sector against freed slaves and their descendants. This text, called H.R. 40, referred to the broken promise to African-American slaves freed after the Civil War to give them 40 acres of land to cultivate and a mule. This decision, historic as it is, forces us to recognize the pugnacity of those who led the fight for this recognition to occur despite opposition. But it questions on more than one level. Who will be affected by this law? 4 million of African American, but what about everyone else? But what about the others? Is this not reintroducing a form of discrimination between the descendant of the enslaved of the South state of US and all the other Afro-descendants, but originating from a geographical area other than the United States of the North? Let us not forget that the future law aims to repair the negative effect of enslavement. It's not a way to never add to be faced with dehumanization and desacralization of Black bodies. So would they consider themselves left with a paltry sum? Does the liberal system show all its cynicism and violence by agreeing to grant financial compensation for the irreparable, and this without justice judging the crimes of genocide and against humanity? In doing so, the European colonizer participated in the destruction of the essential foundation of life of African groups, ethnicities, with the aim of exporting Black bodies, preferring to make the maximum profit from the natural resources that they stole from the exterminated or enslaved people by making sure that the exploitation of the latter would not cost them anything. Capitalism thus found its first justification in globalization, which needed the circulation of goods, its first weapon. Can reparation be thought of in individual terms when it is an entire continent that was destroyed with its living forces and its creative energy during the transatlantic slave trade? Are we seriously considering putting an end to structural racism by accepting individual reparation? Besides, what about the land issue? If the refusal of the colonizer and the North American system of domination to grant the 40 acres, soluble in symbolic compensation, this very small land would not have allowed the newly freed people to secure their food sovereignty anyway. And the indigenous people experiences a veritable genocide so that their sovereignty over the land they inhabited would be destroyed. These lands taken by force, theft, and murder had to be attributed to the new colonizer. Everything has been done so that the new freed and the indigenous peoples not yet exterminated can never control the means of production. They were forced to enroll in the colonial economy. As farmers are independent of the regime of large export, they have no control over them, and thus an economy of dependence on the state has been established for the economic benefit of large economical groups. From this point of view, the failure to respect the promise made to the new freed 40 acres and a mule perfectly illustrates how a state, as regards the question of land and more specifically the right to sovereignty, can conduct a discriminatory policy by stubbornly refusing to recognize the rights of minorities in the name of equality, which is nothing more than the expression of indirect economic discrimination, but in fact, it is neither more nor less than structural racism. This sleight of hand, which aim not to repair after the abolition, intersubjectivity, otherness, or alterity, allowed that the property of the descendant of slave owner to be definitely consolidated, while the descendant of the enslaved was definitely excluded. It should be noted that the deprivation of farmers who are descendants of enslaved people of the right to own the land they cultivate family for 400 years, when this property has been recognized by the state to people descendant from master slaves. Create distinction, exclusion, and preferences based on national extraction or social origin, which have the effect of destroying equality of opportunity or treatment in matters of occupation. This element characterizes a series of forms of discrimination within the meaning of Article 2, subparagraph A, of the International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. This, of course, is not unique to farmers who are descendants of the enslaved. Therefore, one can legitimately wonder about the effect of this future law. Will it loosen the grip of the abusive confinement of Black men? Will it succeed in making all those who occupy positions of domination seriously question the reason explaining that the vast majority of people who have died from the coronavirus are Afro-descendants and Africans? At the time of the pandemic, when analyzing statistics in support, the impact of chaotic management of the body of the racialized and the most precarious, it is found that structural racism does not leave space to Black bodies. The coronavirus strikes them hardly. This information must be crossed with the socio-economic information that we know about the living condition of the Afro-descendant, low income, lack of employment and qualification, failing education, assumption of insufficient health, socio-spatial segregation, police violence, and mass incarceration, to whom fundamental human rights are systematically denied. Systematically because this denial is anchored in the colonial paradigm of racialization, structural violence, and a global economic system that has historically exploited and dehumanized and continues to do so. This finding covering inequalities in front of this pandemic should finally open the eye of those who do not want to decile them. This social subordination has never stopped and seems, for those who carry out the function of domination, to fit seamlessly with the subordination of the racialized part of the national population. Confront with this brutal reality, is it necessary to insist that in the framework of the pandemic, the question of race is an aggravating factor? Yes. To claim the contrary would be absurd and reductionistic, and above all, would show how structural racism closes itself in deceptive argument to hide itself even better. It's clear that in order to understand the devastating impact of the coronavirus on the race population, we have to treat question of race and of class together without forgetting that race was imposed as a fundamental criterion of a universal social classification of the world's population. And it was according to this concept that the principal social and geo-cultural identities of the time were assigned. Even if this does not shock us any longer, we can legitimately criticize the media conglomerates and government, which limit themselves to emphasizing the different rates of mortality as a function of age, while carefully refraining from pointing to social identities. This sleight of hand, which is a real political choice, participates in making Africans and those of African descent invisible and avoids emphasizing the consequences of this pandemic in social, economic, and political terms for the after times, which we keep on hearing about. On top of that, it keeps this government from having to admit their racism openly. The capitalist system refused to recognize that it was built on the basis of the establishment of a policy of race, which allow it to continue to manage bodies according to a logic of profitability and the bottom line, all the while extolling the universality of its commitment. Faced with the unknown that this pandemic represents, the president of France seems at one time to be drawn to a critical perspective with regard to a system which had to confront the tremendous acceleration of a pandemic that was outrunning the invisible hand of the market. In March 2020, as the pandemic was decisively gaining ground, he stated, I quote, "We will not add the fear of bankruptcy, the anguish of unemployment, and the difficulty for employees to make ends meet to the threat of our health. Therefore, we will do everything to protect our employees and our businesses, whatever it may cost," unquote, which might have led him to foresee some potentially different political choice. But this famous promise, whatever it may cost, fizzled out. Moreover, the president omitted to consider workers in the informal sector, many of whom are of African origin. Once again, they have been excluded from any government support, which was not really surprising. The market quickly reasserted its strength and got the upper hand by trying to explain that the financial crisis in which il y a un problème? There is a problem? Is there a problem? Hello, hello. You lost?
There was a problem for me. I was following you fine, but then suddenly I lost.
Yes, I know. I listen that. I understand that.
Okay, good. So if you could go back to that portion in which you talk about the social subordination has never stopped, it seems, and seems for those who carry out the functions of domination. If you could start the paragraph again. You talk about the social subordination and how it has never stopped. that would be perfect. But if you could also pace yourself a little bit more, because I'm very well acquainted with the subject matter, but I need to be like a couple of seconds following you. So just pace yourself a little bit more. Thank you so much. The social subordination has never stopped, it seems.
But it's
on
very far.
Page 3.
Page 3.
Yes.
Which paragraph? Excuse me.
Page 3. The social subordination has never stopped, it seems, for those who carry out the functions
yes,
of
at the
domination.
beginning. Okay,
Yes.
Okay, go back to this. Okay. The social subordination has never stopped and seems, for those who carry out the function of domination, to fit seamlessly with the subordination of the racialized part of the national population. Confronted with this brutal reality, is it necessary to insist that in the framework of the pandemic, the question of race is an aggravating factor? Yes, to claim the contrary would be absurd and reductionistic. And above all, would show how structural racism closes itself in deceptive arguments to hide itself even better. It's clear that in order to understand the devastating impact of the coronavirus on race population, we have to treat question of race and class together, without forgetting that race, I quote, was imposed as a fundamental criterion of a universal social classification of the world population, and it was according to this concept that the principal social and geocultural identities of the time were assigned, end quote. Even if this does not shock us any longer, we can legitimately criticize the media conglomerates and governments which limit themselves to emphasizing the different rates of mortality as a function of age, while carefully refraining from pointing to social identities. This sleight of hand, which is a real political choice, participate in making Africans and those of African descent invisible and avoids envisioning the consequences of this pandemic in social, economic, and political terms for the world after, or for after times, which we keep on hearing about. On top of that, it keeps this government from having to admit their racism openly. The capitalist system refused to recognize that it was built on the basis of the establishment of a politic of race, which allow it to continue to manage bodies according to a logic of profitabilities and the bottom line, all the while extolling the universality of its commitment. Faced with the unknown that this pandemic represents, the President of France seemed at one time to be drawn to a critical perspective with regards to a system which had to confront the tremendous acceleration of a pandemic that was outrunning the invisible hand of the market. In March 2020, as the pandemic was decisively gaining ground, he stated, I quote, "We will not add the fear of bankruptcy, the anguish of unemployment, and the difficulty for employees to make ends meet to the threat of our health. Therefore, we will do everything to protect our employees and our businesses, whatever it may cost," unquote, which might have led him to foresee some potentially different political choice. But this famous promise, whatever it may cost, fizzled out. Moreover, the president omitted to consider workers in the informal sector, many of whom are of African origin. Once again, they have been excluded from any governmental support, which was not really surprising. The market quickly reasserted its strength and got the upper hand by trying to explain that the financial crisis in which we have been living since 2018 was the consequences of the coronavirus. This mystifying explanation, as Eric Toussaint points out, I quote, is a ploy meant to divert the attention of the 99% away from the role played by the policy carried out on behalf of the big business on the planetary level and from the complicity of the government in power, unquote. If indeed businesses and employees have received assistance, in a word, if the system of production has received what it needs to hang on, is the same true for the health system, which has quickly shown its limits. Limits imposed since well before the time of the pandemic crisis by the successive neoliberal plans of reorganization, which brought this health system to their knee by reducing hospital budget and by lack of investment in the necessary infrastructures. It is therefore not surprising to note that the first victim of this crushing choice are mainly African descent and indigenous people, racialized, excluded, and precarious population, which, apart from any pandemic, suffer from lack of access to healthcare and lack of adequate conditions for good health. Let me emphasize something that had no escape the notice of any of us. Many people of African descent are often on the front lines, employed in essential services, which now that these operations are open, permit millions of people in Western countries to remain confined to their home. In spite of their presence, numerous governments have now found a way to furnish adequate protective measures to these essential workers in hospitals, medical centers, public transportation, sanitation, deliveries. Furthermore, and in spite of the number of victims in this occupation, the majority of governments continue to reduce public spending in these sectors. The phrase, whatever it may cost, and its supposed commitment of service has already fallen into the domain of ironic expression, which the voter will be sure to remember. In spite of their presence, numerous governments have now found a way to furnish, the damaging management of this pandemic will have far-reaching consequences on the social, economic, cultural, and political level, as well on the level of mental health. Some governments have seemed to discover that their citizens have souls and that this pandemic risked leading many of them towards psychological deterioration. This pandemic in itself contributes directly traumatic stress. It has put and always puts our intersubjective relation on hold makes us consider bodies to be dangerous and no longer lets us touch each other. It questions the ontological posture of each of us. Is not there a risk in such time of such a serious collective crisis of losing understanding of oneself and of one's desire for the other? Won't they privilege the way that a certain country, criticized for its authoritarianism, assume influence and control over bodies? Would their way be the best solution for neoliberal states which think that people themselves are the problem and who impose a permanent war on their own people at one level or another? Does not this choice end up confirming the paradigm of domination over bodies and soul, and particularly over Black bodies, because the system and those who control its dominating function don't see them or make them invisible? Can we seriously think that this intentional avoidance by white people has no consequences for the psyche of Black people? To reclaim the sense of the other or otherness and intersubjectivity, all of which has been massacred, the word is not excessive, since the first day of the discovery of 1492, which inaugurated a period of catastrophic development for humanity, is even more dangerous now than it was before the pandemic. This particular treatment of Afro-descendants is part of the long history of the formerly slavery and colonizer country, where the socially constructed concept of race has served as a foundation to the capitalist system. The race, as pointed out Aníbal Quijano, play a fundamental role during colonization, precisely because it confirms the dominant position occupied by the white European. This assigns all the other, and particularly Black and indigenous bodies, to a subordinate position. In this sense, the race constitutes, I quote, the first modern category, because it allows to classify the population from phenotypic difference, the color of the skin in particular, the differentiation and the social subordination of certain groups appearing as the effect of natural process, unquote. Therefore, race has acted and continue to act as a more or less conscious social and political marker as a power regime. We are talking about structural racism and non-systemic racism that allows historical fundamental that makes our common history are forgotten, which is far from a shared humanity. However, structural racism can only be questioned transformatively only if there is no denial of history, rewriting of history, and this for the process of political and collective reparation. We are talking about structural racism. Oh, sorry. It is enough to recognize the consequences of the crime of enslavement, to question the foundation of the capitalist system. What does recognition mean in such a context, where we write by accepting that the first identification proposal of the International Decade for People of African Descent, presented by the expert of the Working Group of People of African Descent, be reparation, justice, development, be replaced by recognition, justice, development. on the pretext that some states, Western or allies, refuse to open these pages. Let us remember the International Conference Against Racism, Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Intolerance associated in 2001 in Durban. What interrogates? It is a concept of recognition that implies a form of generosity on the part of the institutions that recognize the other, while it did not exist before. Thus, Afro-Colombian, whose citizen existence did not exist before 1991, the new 1991 Constitution gave them recognition, but they continue to be denied in their being, their tradition, and political status of Colombian citizens. The Colombian government, believe, have shown generosity, but its generosity is limited by fear of granting rights for anyone, for the other. Moreover, the concept of recognition carries in it paradoxically, if it is accepted that the state is responsible for exclusion of all the evils experienced by the racialized and precarious person, then contact this institution to find a solution to these evils become a paradox because the dominant state admit only asymmetry. It is an overhang institution. It is always clear that recognition will only be in the term imposed by the state or by international institutions. Let us add that the recognition can be perceived in a negative way. So when Frantz Fanon is recognized as a Negro by a young child, this recognition carries in it the fears, the threat introduced by the marker of the difference, the race, and is thus enters in a negative intelligibility. We can see while recognition authorizes that in advance in a non-symmetrical, non-reciprocal way. This is what the Black body feel, victim of structural racism. Take the example of France, where recognition goes through assimilation, integration, abandonment of his or her culture. It is only when this different stage will be crossed that the other can be considered as a citizen, as human. As a Black Muslim, you have to give up something of yourself. It is request in a way to convert. For some, one becomes human from the moment when one is recognized by someone in his otherness. For others, recognition does not depend on others. We do not need the other to be human. It is the desire for recognition that counts, not the act. This is the need for humanity, the need for communities that counts. With this coming law from the Congress in the US, would the dominant white system tend to put forward the recognition, the generosity that they showed by passing this law? Would they not thus have argument for never acknowledging the crimes committed by one human against another human? Does this crime have a price? And would not this be an additional means in the face of all demand to muzzle African American even more? Faced with this criticism on the term recognition, it would have been preferable in the context of the International Decade to choose that of dignity, which makes it possible to think the condition of the reconquest of his humanity, which has been withdrawn by dehumanization that carry within them enslavement and colonization. Dignity belongs only to you. It is unalterably yours. It does not suppose to be recognized or being attributed by someone. It is an intrinsic value of human existence. It should be noted that we never speak of dignity for a person at the top of his glory. In the case of Afro-descendants and Africans, dignity makes it possible to go to a need for Black energy, while recognition supposes vulnerability, weakness, if the one in front of you ceases to recognize you. In the face of violence and injustice suffered, the Black body is allowed to go out of his own and to go on the assault of what oppressed him. From then on, dignity speaks on the condition under which the oppressed will commit. It is a policy of necessity. Policy understood to make choices, among others, the one who is the best to get out of the inhumanity in which the Black bodies have been enrolled. For Blacks, when they say they cannot breathe, they have no alternative except to fight for the respect of their dignity. Here also, it is a policy of necessity. But can the liberal capitalist system be sensitive to the policy of necessity claimed by the racialized, the precarious, and the excluded? The financial and health crisis, but also the crisis of sovereign debt. This word must be emphasized to show how fragile and meaningless is the national and state representation that has become subservient to the power of money, reveal the permanence of fractures and technique of subjugation, inferiorization, internalization of injustice, and denial of justice in countries that claim to be democratic. It is currently possible that the state and its agent can with impunity put a Black man to death, search a home for supposed relation with a terrorist group, ravage a country under the bombs without the mechanism of war crimes being called into play. Through supreme intellectual subterfuge, bludgeoned by increasingly massive and sophisticated means, the causes of social malaise and economic distortion are blamed on the poor and excluded. The discourse is articulated around fear and the assertion of the natural character of the establishment order, and there is no hesitation at a time when it is the peoples who constitute the adjustment variable of the system to revive the disastrous populist discourse. The response of the supporter of the dominant system to the crisis is without finesse, but it is based on massive and formidable means. Within the border, scapegoats, migrants, sons of immigrants, African, Afro-descendant, travelers, workers, Muslims are designated, and the poor are pitted against the poorest. Outside, it is even more visible. We return to the old colonial policy on the gunboat while waiting for war of higher intensity. Today, as in the past, colonialism still advances wearing the mask of the civilizing mission, This brutal policy is draped with the ultimate humanist concept, eradication of poverty, obligation to protect, equality, fight against racism. It is thus clear that before talking about the future, we must remember that the present is a product of a past, that of enslavement, transatlantic slave trade, dehumanization of the Black people, and desacralization of the Black bodies, which offered to European countries their wealth and to white people their own identity, and allowed Europe to invade the whole world by pretending to discover it. It should be noted that this new doctrine, that was the world economy, had as its heart a concept of newness that was inseparably linked to the notion of social and world order that allow colonial type relationship to become a central characteristic of the current new world. In order to ensure that this new world would indeed concern the whole world, rather than just the relationship between Europe and the Americas, Europeans over the century set up this new world as a model, thus becoming the model of the whole world system, as Aníbal Quirano and Immanuel Wallerstein point out. Therefore, does not the desire to build a future require us to regain sovereignty over the past, which has given rise to such disaster for humanity? As Fanon reminds us, the law that colonialism imposes on the present and the future is based on its definition of the past, which structures the perspective of the present. Thus, the colonial and imperialist power have granted each other conduct exempt from crimes committed against other human beings. They began with the period that installed the enslavement, colonization, and colonialism. The memory of this period has not ceased to obscure the crimes committed and the reason why they were committed. It has been rewritten according to the objective of those who dominate in order, if necessary, to transform the historical fact, erase them from the collective memory, and erase them from the public space. In a word, what the partisans of a clean, dignified history that nourishes the national narrative propose is to live in a schizophrenic world. Everything that disturbs the order of domination, everything that is a matter of historical truth must be lobotomized. The problem of the past, structuring the present, and enclosing the future is at the heart of a phenomenon that the West has managed to convince the whole world of, namely that inscribes in modernity, science and history, and a large part of opinion are today convinced by the narrative of the West about itself and about the rest of the world. So much so that when Cheikh Anta Diop presented his research on the Black origin of ancient Egypt, he met only contempt on the part of the white universities who claim to be holder of knowledge that must be shared and who cannot bear to have their analysis questioned, let alone by an African. This narrative, because it's only a narrative, presents history as a linear and progressive evolution, making the Euro-Western civilization, born of the transatlantic slave trade, of the dehumanization of Black people, at the same time the culmination of civilization, the point of reference and the project for the future for all the people of the world. Even today, the policies of all the countries of the world are aimed at the modernization of structures, even those that present themselves as rivals to the Euro-American axis. Believing that they are replacing white civilization, the new power of the poorly developed world, are particularly participating in the triumph of its structure, reproducing imperialism, colonialism, negrophobic and Islamophobic state racism. The first danger for the construction of a decolonial future concerns the reproduction of colonial scheme by this national bourgeoisie, so much denounced by Fanon in The Watchers of the Earth, which by its laziness and its mimicry, favored the reinforcement of the philosophy and practice that characterized the colonizer, extended dehumanization, and perpetuated the zone of non-being into which the Black people were plunged by the colonial night. One of the forms of this laziness, even betrayal, is the confinement of liberation struggle in the past and their fetishization by contemporary third world leaders. The epic of liberation must not become the new opium of our people.
Você precisa colocar o fone, senão o áudio de Fanon invade as salas de tradução.
Eu preciso de intervalo de minuto, portanto. I will need a 1 minute break because I need to change my headphones.
Okay. Please do.
A intérprete solicitou 1 minuto para reorganizar o áudio dela. A gente agradece a paciência de vocês.
Yes, I just had to change my headset for some a decolonized future.
Yes, okay. Okay. Go back, it's okay, go. I lost you.
The first danger for the construction of a decolonized future, that's where you
Okay.
were.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for that interruption.
No, it's okay. One of the forms of this laziness, even betrayal, is the confinement of liberation struggle in the past and their fetishization by contemporary third world leaders. The epic of liberation must not become the new opium of our people. How many regimes born of glorious anti-colonial revolution have thus poured into the idolatry that poorly conceal the renunciation of the historical mission of building a new world and a new humanity. Decolonization is not a phenomenon of the past. It is a process over a long period of time, a program of absolute disorder that must be ordered. Our mission, says Fanon, is to order all revolt, all desperate acts, all aborted or blood-drawn attempts. Okay? Faced with this program, no.
Let me just see where this noise is coming. My neighbor.
Faced with this program, one understands the fear of the defender of the Eurocentric racial order, which pushes them to erratic judgment, ridiculous deliriums, but above all to a headlong rush into repression where they betray all the principles that their order claims to defend. In doing so, they unmask themselves and participate in the triumph of truth over the world they cherish. We can thus approach the question of a decolonized future in its negative dimension, that is, that of the terror that its perspective induces in the consciousness of the colonizer. This terrifying future, that of the loss of racial privileges, of a clean slate of the world created by and for whites, with the blood and sweat of black bodies, induces the delirium that the world witnesses when it sees the current offensive of the French authority and racist forces against the decolonial movement. The decolonial panic that our movement inspires is in a way proof that we are following the right path. The achievement of decolonization at Fanon can be summarized in this sentence: the last will be the first. Decolonization is the apocalypse of the colonial world. By apocalypse, it is not to be understood as the end of the world, represented by the secularized culture of the white world. It means the salvation of the oppressed and the triumph of a truth found by power embodying a primordial lie, that of the superiority and centrality of the white man. The decolonial future is a triumph of a new humanity, a triumph of being fully realized, of an equally shared dignity of people, of a real fraternity. It is a promise of salvation for all peoples, and it is the promise of hell for those who struggles against its coming. The Fanonian perspective on the mechanic of domination, exploitation, and alienation retains all its causality, and the inevitable revolt in the face of an absurd and criminal social, political, and economic system remains the path for the emancipation of all, dominated but also dominant in the decolonial, humanist, and universalist sense. To do this, we must summon Black Archive of Africa, but also of the Caribbean, North America, and Europe can be linked to develop dignity. The latter must be thought since the political statute of the human, and without forgetting that dignity is linked to be co-founder of a common world, as well as emphasizes Hannah Arendt. Thus, Pan-Africanism as a part of the project of emancipation must be welcome. Rereading Fanon in the light of this health crisis and all that is revealed in terms of the coloniality of power, which continue to be exercised over non-being, we understand the urgency that exists for the people of the global south to establish a new man. Isn't this what the young people who are taking over the street of certain African cities are trying to say? If there's an urgency for the global south, there's an urgency for the colonial north as well. On the basis of his revolutionary and resolutely decolonial conception of humanity, in which the theme of liberation and disalienation occupy a central place, Fanon obliged us to think about the human while taking into account the experience of the inhuman, which include the indecent living condition in which poor population in the global south and the racialized minority in the global north are kept. In this framework, it is imperative for the pandemic to be understood from a decolonial perspective in order to fully understand the reason for its erratic liberal management. How can we act and think so that the human can collectively extract himself from the zone of non-being brought about by the ideology of coloniality, as both Lewis Gordon and Nelson Maldonado Torres have emphasized? How can we change the geography of the coloniality of power, which never stops subjugating in order to better control and above all to maintain itself? I willingly endorse Hegel's affirmation that, I quote, the slave is the truth of the masters, unquote. What decolonial rupture can be brought about so that the paradigm of the domination of the master might stop keeping millions of beings from breathing? A posture of rupture, opening what it is possible towards the building of the world of few, to be reached by refuting the idea that humanity and equality can be any part of the process of dehumanization, erasure and insignificance, which are the true scandal of the coloniality of power towards the bodies of non-being. Obrigada.
Em relação aos corpos daqueles que não são seres. Muito obrigada. Dr. Fanon, thank you so much. Would you like to take a little break?
No, it's late in
Dr.
Paris.
Fanon, thank you so much. Would you like to take a little break before
No,
you
it's
address
okay.
some of the questions that are coming from the audience?
It's okay.
So I have just received these questions here. If you could give me a quick second, I'll share them with you. So once again, thank you for your lecture. It was brilliant. It was profound. And you have given us a whole lot of food for thought, because I have observed that you have raised many questions. 10 of those questions would end up becoming a whole thesis. So once again, thank you. It was truly profound. These are my own remarks. And now I am going to the question. This is a question coming from Amanda Reis Oliveira. How impacting, or what were the impacts of these manifestations or the protests fostered by the death of George Floyd all over the world in terms of combating structural racism on a global scale? Would you like to address two or three questions at once, or would you like to address?
I think it's better, because I am a little bit tired now.
Okay.
And I think it's better for me to
Answer them
answer.
one by one.
Yes, if I may.
That's perfectly okay. So the first question has to do with your assessment of these protests on a global scale that were triggered by George Floyd's assassination in the United States.
What exactly is the question? I forgot the beginning.
What is your assessment of the protests triggered by the assassination of George Floyd on a global scale in terms of challenging or dismantling, if you will, structural racism?
My own perspective is at the George Floyd assassination was one death. How did you say, de trop?
O assassinato de George Floyd foi algo que, como diríamos,
oh my God, I forgot the term, de trop. It was. I'm sorry, I forgot the term in English. I try to rephrase what I want to say.
No problem. Ela está ali, gente, tentando decidir entre o francês e o inglês.
This death was too much. It was really too much. That's why
foi
the people
realmente
react so
exagero.
quick,
Foi por isso
fast,
que as
and
pessoas
so
reagiram de maneira tão rápida.
they were exasperated.
E foram reações muito exasperadas.
And my question is, I understand very well the reason why the people were in the street.
Que as pessoas estavam protestando nas ruas, porém,
and I understand very well what they are protesting,
e eu
making
compreendo
riots,
perfeitamente que as pessoas
and
estavam
asking the reform of the
protestando
police, the
e
reform of the
pedindo
police.
demandando, exigindo a reforma policial. Porém, a minha pergunta é:
tackle structural racism.
Essa é a forma de lidarmos, de abordarmos o racismo estrutural? Porque se é
like
possível
Floyd,
matar alguém como George Floyd,
the young
ou esse jovem adolescente que foi morto recentemente também pela polícia, 3, 4 dias atrás,
it is because the police
em função
think it is possible for the agent of this public service to kill the people,
possível para agente do serviço público matar uma pessoa negra,
are enemies. and they are subject to this
e considerá-los
enemy
como inimigos,
every
e
moment
serem
of their
tratados como
work.
inimigos
And
pelo mundo afora, e quando
one of the means they have found it's to kill the people because they are
uma das
afraid,
formas de
and it is because it
lidar
is
com essas
possible.
pessoas
And
é
I don't
matar
know
essas
if
pessoas. E se é
you have
possível, eu não sei
watched
se vocês têm observado ou
the
tiveram a
Derek
oportunidade de assistir
the trial
o julgamento do
direct
policial que
on
matou
CNN, for
George
example.
Floyd,
For me, I
Derek
can
Chauvin,
watch.
que
And
foi transmitido ao vivo, por exemplo, pela CNN.
I was surprised because there is even
E
from
eu assisti esse julgamento porque mesmo
the defendant, George
os
Floyd
advogados
family,
de defesa
the
que
attorney
representavam a família de George Floyd,
present
eles
George
apresentaram
Floyd as
George Floyd como
with a difficult
uma
personality,
de personalidade
and
difícil,
even like a person with his borderline.
ou uma pessoa que
And,
tinha uma personalidade borderline.
Until now, I did not see something.
E até agora eu não vi nada.
The bias, the racial questioning the structural racism, or even what they said in US, systemic
ou
racism.
aquilo que é dito nos Estados Unidos,
I did not watch yesterday, but
eu não
on
assisti
Thursday and
o
Wednesday I
julgamento
watched,
ontem, a
and
transmissão
I
do
did not
julgamento ontem, mas eu até
listen any comment, any critiques
nenhum
of
comentário, nenhuma crítica
the policy of racialization put in place
as políticas
since
de radicalização
enslavement.
que são vigentes desde a escravização.
When after the George Floyd death, that's true. There was a lot of manifestation around the world,
protestos pelo mundo afora.
I think because the people think enough is enough. That's true.
Já chegaram ao limite,
but
já
also there is a will
também havia
and a need to question
the
structural racism wherever it is. And in France, it was very visible,
na França,
and
bastante visível,
some groups
foram visíveis, e alguns grupos
took this George Floyd example as
pegaram esse exemplo da morte de George Floyd como
in order also to question
caso
the police violence in our country, because there is
a violência
young
racial
people,
ou violência policial
young
em
people
nosso país,
killed by
porque
the
muitas
police
pessoas jovens
without
negras
any reason.
São mortas pela polícia sem nenhum motivo, sem nenhuma razão.
Killed with a bullet in the back.
Foi caso de menino que tomou tiro pelas costas.
And the police also justify
e a polícia também justificou essa morte
in US because they are dangerous, and as we have seen the young policewoman who killed, I don't remember his name, last Sunday, I think,
jovem de 20 anos, esqueci o nome dele,
without any reason, because he was not
nenhum
violent,
motivo, porque ele não
George
estava
Floyd
sendo
was
violento.
not. But also,
também,
if I try to be
se eu tentar ser
also honest,
honesta, se eu for
I think the way George Floyd was killed with a knee of Derek Chauvin of his knee, of his neck,
joelho no seu pescoço,
there is something, it's
algo.
Everybody could watch that, and there is some
viu isso.
The level of acceptability was over, because we can see how he was killed,
nós podemos testemunhar
and it is really a murder, done openly in the face of millions and millions of people,
de milhões de pessoas.
And for me, it's like
e para mim é como,
but done by a civil servant.
Foi algo que foi,
and that at this point is very interesting
por
to see the kind of death penalty
diz respeito
realized by
funciona
civil
a
servants,
pena
because
de morte
it's point out
perpetrada
how
por
the
trabalhador
police
do
consider
sistema
black people.
a partir
And
do momento que a
I think
polícia
it is
mata
also the
pessoas
same
negras.
in
E eu acho
Brazil,
que é a mesma coisa que ocorre no Brasil,
where young people are
servidores
killed
públicos pessoas sendo
even
mortas por
more
servidores
than in
públicos,
US.
até mais do que nos Estados
I don't
Unidos, em
listen
maior
you.
escala do que nos Estados Unidos. Can you hear me again now?
I can't
Hello?
hear your voice.
Ok, produção, por que ela não está conseguindo ouvir minha voz?
Mike,
Something happened here and you
no
cannot hear.
Mike,
Ela precisa aumentar o som
nothing,
do notebook,
no
porque agora
sound.
estamos só pelo notebook.
Visto que o chat foi desabilitado para mim, gente, alguém precisa escrever para ela que ela tem que aumentar o volume, porque foi encerrada a outra transmissão. Second question, if you could give us 5 more minutes, please, because I know we are going over time here, but we have a couple of questions. And the next question is, what is your perspective in terms of effective ways of combating structural racism during the pandemic and after the pandemic? Do you think that we are going to be better human beings or better humans once this pandemic is declared over? And this is a question by Leticia Alves.
No, my answer would be very short, no.
A minha
think it would be
resposta para a
worse.
sua pergunta é não. Eu acredito, na verdade, que nós seremos piores,
Unfortunately.
infelizmente. So would you like me to go to the next question? This is the last question, actually. It's a question by Nicole França. The question is it possible to think about a capitalist world without racism? Or a new economic system that would bring a possible scenario of a plural humanism in which there would be a horizontal relationships amongst different groups, social groups and different people?
Yes, we have to have some hope.
Nós temos que ter algum tipo de
But,
esperança,
for the moment, I think we did
mas
not.
para o momento,
We are not going to this.
eu
We are
não acredito que nós
going
estamos
back to the future.
caminhando em relação a isso. Na verdade, nós estamos rumo àquilo que ela chama de volta para o futuro.
Because now we can see how
Porque agora nós podemos perceber,
before that they impose a security measure
eles
after
tentaram
the
impor
2001
medidas de segurança depois do
bombing in US,
ataque que ocorreu nos Estados Unidos às
and they
Torres
begin to
Gêmeas,
control our
e eles
liberty, private
começaram a
public liberty.
controlar as nossas
And
liberdades
now they
de
had something else
movimento,
with
e depois disso,
pandemic.
durante agora com a questão
health,
da pandemia, em função dessas questões de preocupação com saúde, agora eles querem controlar nossos corpos.
And I think, for example, I'm sure
E eu acho que, por exemplo,
there will be people able to travel
haverá pessoas que não poderão viajar
with a passport, health passport,
com passaportes
and
de determinados lugares,
regarding the vaccine you got.
De acordo com o seu cartão de vacinação.
I think, and it is a new way to control
É, portanto, uma nova forma de controlar
mind, our
nossas
liberty,
mentes,
and our health, our body.
liberdades e nossa saúde, nossos
Health
corpos.
bodies. And I think the system
E eu acho que o sistema
need to
necessita,
go over and over. The system need to
o sistema necessita ser
control the body and to know exactly where the people
Agora
are, what they are
está
doing, and to
buscando
decide what they
controlar
need,
os corpos
what
e
they
saber
need,
onde
and
esses
to
corpos estão.
create
E
new ways,
saber
means to control, to
há
more.
agora novas formas de controle sendo reconfiguradas.
That is why I mentioned
E
in
é
my
por isso
paper
que eu
they are
mencionei no
criticizing.
meu
It is also interesting
trabalho
how
que há uma
so-called
crítica
democratic state are
desse
criticizing
Estado
China,
democrático,
for example.
por exemplo,
If we
mas se nós
attentive, or if we are
estivermos atentos,
we can see
nós podemos
our
perceber
European Occidental country are exactly reproducing the same
que nós estamos reproduzindo
the same way to control the life
as
of
mesmas
people,
formas de controle da
and
vida,
to
das
impose
pessoas,
that.
e para impor esse controle.
And during the pandemic,
Durante a pandemia,
a very small window at the cultural
houve uma
because
abertura pequena nesse
in your
espaço da
country or in those other
cultura,
countries who were under lockdown, and it would
durante
be very
essas
interesting to see
imposições de
if
lockdown, seria interessante
television
observar
was able
que
to endorse its obligation. It means
se essas obrigações foram de alguma
to
forma
educate the people, but
reforçadas,
in a noble way.
se pudéssemos achar outras formas de educar as pessoas através de
France, I don't know
programas.
in Brazil, but in France, for
Eu não
example,
sei no Brasil,
most
mas na França,
of
por
the channel
exemplo,
now are just based on a reality show. That means the stupidity,
todas essas programações de televisão agora são baseadas em shows, né, reality shows. Isso significa que então estamos tendo aí uma visibilização ainda maior da estupidez,
lies, of the
a estupidez,
and it's to make some comments or to
para fazer
criticize
comentários ou criticar
are considered as a danger, and
o nosso país
we
enquanto
have
perigo, e nós temos que
follow what they are doing for us, and they are doing things for us. They are deciding
temos
for
que
us.
seguir o que eles estão fazendo por nós, eles estão fazendo coisas por
We
nós,
lose our part
e nós perdemos a nossa parte,
of decision, our own decision, our own
a nossa
reflection.
capacidade de decisão,
And its impact also
e isso também diz respeito a
in France, for example, we have
na
now
França, por
some
exemplo, nós temos
intellectuals,
agora
so-called
intelectuais, assim chamados
saying
intelectuais,
when we are speaking
quando
from decolonial
estamos
perspective,
falando sobre
they
perspectivas
consider
descoloniais,
we are
eles
a
consideram que
danger. We
nós
are really a danger,
somos
and we
perigo
denounce
real,
us as a danger.
e
And
enquanto
they ask
perigos,
the president of university to not
os
authorize
presidentes
us
das universidades não
at the
permitem
university.
que nós falemos em nome da universidade.
And there was also a new obsession.
E houve também uma nova
against,
obsessão aqui na França,
And when we support
que quando nós
Muslim community, they
apoiamos,
consider us as Islamo-leftist.
when we support what again?
Muslim community.
Qualquer pessoa que preste apoio à comunidade muçulmana, portanto, também é considerada terrorista por estar apoiando a comunidade muçulmana.
Islamo-leftist. It's a very interesting concept.
É um termo interessante, um conceito mais específico que se chama, somos esquerdistas muçulmanos.
It's very interesting to see that because
É muito interessante perceber isso
it's
porque
following what happens with the pandemic and what
está
happened with the security
acontecendo durante o processo do
security,
desenrolar da pandemia,
plan. And
e a partir desse
really
contexto,
interesting
desse
to
plano
see
de
how
segurança,
they
e é
control
interessante
us and how
perceber
they
como
track
há esse controle
in the
sobre nós
corner when they
e
can
como essas pessoas,
can,
como nós estamos sendo então
control us
empurrados,
more and more.
encurralados a partir
That's why I think,
desse
unfortunately,
rótulo de sermos perigosos.
we could
É por isso que eu penso que
at the beginning of the pandemic they will consider
no começo da pandemia
as
as pessoas eram consideradas como
les gens comme des to reinforce the visibility of people,
para reforçar a visibilidade das pessoas, a humanidade das pessoas.
And it's not the case.
E não tem sido este o caso, não tem sido este o caso.
It's not the case. And it is also interesting, unfortunately, I say interesting, but it's really
também interessante, mas bastante, infelizmente, na verdade,
the Brazilian president is
o presidente do Brasil também a forma que ele está gerenciando a pandemia.
And it was the same thing with Trump. They don't care about.
E era a mesma coisa com Trump, porque eles não têm essa preocupação com as pessoas. Well, Dr. Fanon, thank you so much. I know this has been a little bit trying because we had some technical difficulties.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you for your translation.
Yes, it was really an honor. And I'm actually going to talk to the commission who organizes the event if we could actually subtitle your lecture so that whatever is available on YouTube is going to be subtitles, okay?
Okay. Is it possible to see the team who organize the event?
I'm not sure if they are there, but let me tell them. Ela está solicitando às pessoas que fazem parte aí da comissão organizadora que abram suas câmeras. Ela gostaria de ver o rosto de vocês.
But thank you. Thank you very much for your translation. Ah, good to see you.
Sim,
good
gente,
to see.
então
Thank you for the
eu
event.
estou aqui
I want just to ask you, what is ENERI? What does it mean, ENERI?
What does ENERI mean? O que significa essa sigla ENERI, por favor?
Encontro Nacional dos Estudantes de Relações Internacionais.
Okay.
It's a national gathering of international studies students.
Very good. Thank you. Nice to see your face.
Bom ver o rosto de vocês.
All of you are students.
Todos eles são estudantes. Todos vocês são estudantes, except for me.
Okay.
I have already finished my PhD via cruises, if you will.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Muito obrigada pelo convite.
And.
Yes, so thank you so much, and we are certainly going to follow up with you regarding. But is it okay if we use your text to subtitle the lecture?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I hope it was clear to translate. It was not too difficult to translate.
No, I just had the chance to catch up with you after like the first two paragraphs. I got acquainted with your rhythm, and I made it. Thank you so much.
Just I want to inform you. I was not a lecture professor at Berkeley. I was just invited. It was a mistake from UN.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we'll follow up with you, and hopefully you're going to have the chance to visit Brazil soon.
I hope. Who knows?
And deliver these lectures in person.
Yeah, I will. Where are you based? In Bahia or in
I'm actually based in Minas Gerais, southeast of Brazil. Yuri, onde é que você está no momento?
But all the students, where are you based?
São Francisco do Conde, Bahia.
Okay. Bahia.
In Salvador. too.
Yes, I know. I know where is it. I was there.
Wonderful. When were you in Salvador?
I was during the World Social Forum.
When was that? 2000
It was, I don't remember, 3 years ago,
Okay.
I think.
Oh,
3
the
years.
World Social Forum, you mean?
And I was there also for the country visit, for the UN
Okay.
country visit for the working group on the 2016.
Okay.
Hmm.
Wonderful. So hopefully I'll have the chance to meet you in person. All of us would like to.
I hope.
Alguma
Ok.
coisa mais, meus queridos, que vocês gostariam que eu dissesse para ela? Eu me desculpei pelas questões técnicas, isso foi um prazer enorme aqui. E sugeri para ela, e vou dizer para vocês aqui, que a gente colocasse legenda no vídeo, tá? Eu traduzirei com o maior prazer e mando para vocês o texto e vocês fazem a parte mecânica, por favor.
Ok.
Thank
Muito
you so
obrigado.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful evening.
No, it's late. It's almost midnight here.
Oh my God, so have a
Paris.
wonderful night. Once again,
That's why
thank you so
sometimes
much.
I was a little bit sleepy.
No, it was perfectly okay. It was wonderful. I learned tremendously. I'm actually going to read your text again now for my own personal research interest.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and keep strong.
We will.
We need you. We need
Well,
you.
we need you too. We need each other.
But we need young people to change the world.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I will let them know that.
And,
Então, vocês ouviram,
the international relation.
vocês ouviram então o que ela disse, né? Que nós precisamos de vocês, pessoas mais jovens, principalmente vocês que estão ligados aos estudos de relações internacionais.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We are just going to have a quick meeting now. Thank you so much. Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful night.
Bye.
Bye. Então, gente, vamos ficar aqui um minutinho, né? Eu vou dizer que entre mortos e feridos, nós sobrevivemos.